Church is dismissed. Well, last week we talked a lot about fishing. You know, when you talk about fishing, usually there's water involved. And Jesus has another approach to fishing. Jesus called at least 4 of his disciples away from the water to go fish, to be fishers of men. You know, water can be a dangerous place, especially when you're in a boat. Like we read earlier from the passage, you know, there could be a squall, there could be a storm. I mean, I could be in the boat. Okay? The 4 disciples, Peter, Andrew, James, John, who Jesus called to fish for men, they were trying to establish their position in life as fishermen. That was their business. That was what they were raised up to do. Their dad was a fisherman. Who knows? Their grandpa was a fisherman. Their great-grandpa was probably a fisherman. They were fishermen. It was a trade that they didn't seem to be successful in without the Lord. I mean, every time Jesus comes upon them and they're fishing, it's usually, we fished all night. We fished all day. And we didn't catch anything. And Jesus says, just throw it on the other side of the boat. Just fish over here. And next thing you know, there was fish. You know, and he was just a carpenter. You know, sometimes it may be a good thing that they switched jobs or got a new career. He's a carpenter by trade, and he tells them how to fish. Please, let's turn to 2 Kings 6:1. You know, establishing yourself in this world, in the business of this world, in a career path in this world, it's fishy business. You know, sometimes it's hard enough just to get the business going, but then you have to deal with trying to stay afloat in relationships or life in general that's racked with storms. Having Jesus around to give you hints and on the work and the business strategies is huge benefit for living and having this good navigator and guide as a key to arriving safely on the other shore. There's another shore. And remembering this through life can keep you from getting sidetracked or snagged in other ventures. You know, we were talking in Sunday school this morning out of Colossians, and it says, our hope, we have a hope in this world, but our greatest hope is on the other shore. There's another shore. And when we get in that water, you know, it's easy to feel like, oh man, how am I ever going to just survive just floating? But Jesus is our guide. And sometimes it feels like he's asleep. But he's caring for you. And he's going to make sure you reach the other shore. Even through the storms of life. Elisha was so focused on the other shore that he didn't want to be weighted down by at least the extra blessing associated with the miracles that God did through him. You know, he could have easily used it for ministry, but he saw it as a snag and a trap. When Gehazi ran after the gifts that Elisha refused and lied to Naaman, lied to Elisha, and ultimately lied to God to justify, acquire, and hide his action, we can see that this was a problem of greed. And it was wisdom on Elisha's part to refuse them. You know, there's nothing wrong with money, okay? Just like there's nothing wrong with your eye, your hand, or your feet. But even Jesus, when he says, if your eye offends thee, gouge it out. It's better to go to heaven with just one eye than to suffer in hell forever and eternity with 2. And he talked about the hand, you know, and the feet. And we think about, you know, the hand. But if it offends you, if it draws you away from reaching that other shore, it's better to do without. And it's the same way with money and greed. And that's why Elisha saw that this is something that is going to draw us away. It's something that's going to snag us. And Gehazi, he definitely snagged Gehazi. Some people might use the excuse, well, if Elijah would have accepted the gifts, then Gehazi would have never had to run after Naaman and lie and achieve those gifts on his own. I like what Ronnie Moyer said last week. We went to Ronnie Moyer over at Burlington. And he says this about those types of excuses. A lot of people blame others or circumstances for their sins, like theft, lying, immorality, anger, and unforgiveness, when those sins are already inside, just waiting to get out. When God talked with Cain, Cain, he killed his brother Abel. But this was before Cain killed Abel. He says, sin is crouching at the door. And it's waiting to open that door. And we look at that, and it was actually that sin inside that was crouching at the door, waiting for an opportunity to jump out. And it did. He murdered his brother. And Elisha's wise choice in keeping the greed from his prophets, it really proved that the greed was already there. It was inside. And after exposing the ugliness of that greed and the integrity of trusting God, the school of the prophets grew. And Elisha fished wisely from the other side of the boat. And let's look at 2 Kings, starting with verse 1 of chapter 6. The company of the prophets said to Elijah, "Look, the place where we meet with you is too small for us. Let us go to the Jordan, where each of us can get a pole, and let us build a place there for us to live." And he said, "Go." Then one of them said, "Won't you please come with your servants?" "I will," Elisha replied. And he went with them. They went to the Jordan and began to cut down trees. And one of them was cutting down a tree. As one of them was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water. "Oh, my Lord," he cried, "it was borrowed." The man of God asked, "Where did it fall?" And he showed him the place. Elisha cut a stick and threw it in there, and he made the iron float. "Lift it out," he said. Then the man reached out his hand and took it. You ever say that to yourself? I should have never stepped out of the door to accomplish anything today. Everything I touch, it's Murphy's Law. Everything is going to break apart. Everything I touch is just going to fail. You want to know the difference between a master and a beginner? A master has failed more times than the beginner has ever tried. I like these students of Elisha. When there was a need, they rolled up their sleeves and they got busy. They started hacking down trees. They were grabbing poles. They were going to make something big. But wait a minute. Wouldn't that gift from Naaman just a couple of miracles earlier have provided for a nice, awesome building? An institute that these prophets, they could focus on studying God's Word instead of chopping down trees. I was looking at Wikipedia and looking at the prices and comparing what exactly Nahum refused. 1 gram of gold costs about $20. At this price, a talent, 75 pounds, would be worth $660,000. Similarly, at the 2005 price, about $7.60 per troy ounce, or 25 kilograms of silver talent, would be worth about $6,500. So based on this information, Elisha refused the gift of gold, 2 talents, and silver, 10 talents from Naaman at a 2005 value of $1,326,500. Like I said, they could have had a nice facility built. But Elisha said, no, I don't want it. It was going to be something that would be a detriment, a snag. And he called it. It's interesting to note that the school of prophets didn't have a problem with it being crowded earlier. It wasn't until Elisha refused the gift and Gehazi left with the miracle of leprosy. A miracle of leprosy? You ever think of a bad thing as a miracle? The thorns on the roses. The negative things in life. Think about the plagues of Egypt. The snakes in the desert. The ground opening up and swallowing up the sons of Korah in their rebellion. What was that? The Bible calls them signs and wonders. But they were acts of God. Elisha had one of these similar miracles at the onset of his ministry, when 42 youth were mauled by bears, when they told him to go up that bald head. Don't ever say that to me. Unless you got a gun and you're ready to shoot some bear, right? Wayne wants to take me hunting. I think he's going to try it out. After all, gospel means good news. Why this negative? Sometimes the best way to know something is by its opposite. If there's nothing bad, what difference would good news make? Please let's turn to Matthew 8:19. The school of the prophets may have increased because of this testimony. We know from the earlier miracle with the 20 loaves of bread that they were feeding 100 prophets at that time. Now, after Elijah refuses this $1.3 something million and performs a miracle giving Gehazi leprosy, suddenly the place where they're staying is too small. Elisha reestablishes the focus of what they were to be doing. They were not seeking God. They were seeking God, not riches. They had integrity, not hypocrisy. And word must have spread, and the people were reeled into the boat as a result. There's a different side of the fish. There's a different side of the fish. Different side of the boat to be fishing from. The world tells you to fish from this side. This is do a demographic thing. Do a study. Figure out what the people want, what the people need. When Jesus says, tell them the truth. Tell them about the other shore. Tell them about what I did. Tell them about God and creation. Elisha didn't hear to the saying, you build it and they will come. In God's economy, what is more pleasing to him? A roomy, aesthetic, financially stable church, or a crowded church dependent on God? In God's economy, what is more pleasing? A roomy, aesthetic, well-established, financially good church, or a crowded church dependent on God? I could tell you what my flesh prefers, what I'd like. And I could tell you also that I struggled with asking these questions, because I wonder if these truths will be enough of an offense for many to just abandon ship. Jesus beckons us to throw the nets from the other side, his side. I believe Elisha asked this question of the right way or the popular way. And he put his trust in God rather than the flesh. It was his desire to please God, not the flesh. He didn't just preach it. He demonstrated it. He demonstrated with his actions. It wasn't the riches of the prophet's school that had lured more to come into the school of the prophets. It was the integrity of Elisha. Sure, Gehazi may have been frustrated with the continual dependence of God for the continued maintenance of the school, but there were others that flocked to it because of the integrity of Elisha and the miracle of judgment for corruption in the ranks. Even as I go to prepare this sermon lately, I've been going over another miracle, Elisha. Really? Do I got to preach about another miracle? And I go, what more can there be in a miracle? Do we really want to depend on God for another miracle, another miracle, another miracle? Or do we really say, let's grow up now. Let's be financially stable. Let's grasp this and move forward. Or should we just be dependent on God's miracles? Ships don't sink because there's water around them. Ships sink because the water that gets in them. Don't let what's happening around you get in you and weigh you down. I wrestle with this. Okay, and I really want you to wrestle with this as well. We need to choose which side to throw our nets from, what bait to use to lure, and whose voice to obey. I talked about the avoidance of turning our fishing vessel into a leisure yacht last week. It's something to guard against and fight. What are we doing to keep this place afloat? Who are we dependent on? Maybe we should get out and chop some wood and risk sinking an axe head so God can be the one who gets the glory for floating a sinking ship. Stepping into God's lifeboat is risky business for earthly wealth and relationships that are destined to sink anyway. Matthew 8, starting with verse 19. Then the teacher of the law came to him and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus replied, "Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." Another disciple said to him, "Lord, let me first go bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead." Then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Without warning, a furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him up, saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." He replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him." Please let's turn to Luke 5:1. Is it risky to get into the lifeboat? Do you think the people on the Titanic, there was this big, huge boat, a monstrosity. It had venues, it had a kitchen and rooms and lights, and then there's this rickety little lifeboat. And you want me to get on that off of this? When Jesus says, "Follow me," you want me to give up burying the dead? You want me to give up my home for this? There's another shore. There's a shore that is going to last forever. And this shore is going to sink. If we don't risk failure, we won't know the miracles God does to and for the faithful. To God's glory, He has worked miracle and miracle after miracle through the faithful, risky work you as a church are doing. But I sense a struggle as we go through the miracles of Elisha, that we are at a crossroads all the time, at a place of self-reliance and dependence on God. I want to keep seeing the miracles of God as we rely on Him. Admittingly, I want to experience a wonderful leisurely fellowship of eating potlucks every other week with all my close friends. Away from the stress and the dependence on miracles to exist. You know, I get told a lot that I like to eat my cake and my ice cream too. You know? And my response is, why not? I can eat my cake and ice cream too. But please struggle with me on this. I don't want to just produce the right answer. I want to take the road that is right. I don't want to just ask the question. I want to answer it in truth and follow that way. You know, do we need to support more missionaries, ministries, or outreaches? You know, do we want to do a mission project or fish for some needs to fill? You know, let's find some needs. You know, I love what Alexis said today. You know, they're having a food drive today, 2 o'clock, and so on. You can leave your food on your doorstep. Probably not out here, but in Akron. You know, there's things that we can do. Needs that we can meet. Do we want to go on a mission project? Do we need to break away from our relaxing time at home? You know, this is my time. And instead go to a Bible study to learn more about God. How can we follow Christ if we at the same time want to feel at home in this world? How can we live in His plan if we are waiting to bury the dead? How can we float if we never step into the boat? You know, sometimes Jesus just needs to direct us to see things from a different angle to catch the fish. Luke 5, starting with verse 1. One day as Jesus was standing on the lake of the Gennesaret, with the people crowding around him and listening to the word of God, he saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. Hey, I like that. Jesus sits down as he preaches. You know, that's pretty good. I can get a stool here. A recliner, okay? Okay. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled the boat so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will catch men." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. While Jesus was in one of the towns, a man came along who was covered with leprosy. When he saw Jesus, he fell with his face to the ground and begged him, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said. "Be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him. There was a purpose that I had for stopping right there with the man from leprosy being cleansed. Because we left off in Elisha with a man that was greedy, that received leprosy. That's what God does to us. When we follow Him, when we trust Him, all our problems are cleansed by His power. Jesus showed the disciples that He could make them rich in the business of fishing till they were sick of seeing fish. And He offered them something greater. He said, "Foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man doesn't have a place to lay His head." Please, let's turn to Isaiah 53:2. Are you sick of just trying to stay afloat? I'm not talking about struggling financially to keep your head above water. I'm talking about having so much interest in the treasure of this world that you're riding out life on a sinking ship. Maybe it's already sunk. Think about it. Your life is borrowed. You're not your own. You're bought with a price. You were vigorously working through the forest of life, and you borrowed life. Your borrowed life flies off the handle. Have you ever flown off the handle? And then it sinks in the muddy transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon Him, and by His wounds we are healed. He was cut off. We were dead in our sins. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. While we were His enemies, God allowed Himself, as this green and tender shoot, to be cut off and thrown where we were sunk in death. There's some hard decisions to make in following Jesus. Let the dead bury their dead. Foxes have holes, birds have nests. The fishermen left their nets, and the leper was healed. Is it really that hard of a decision? Do we really want that borrowed life raised and restored back on the handle, and then to be reconciled back to its rightful owner? It's what we were created for. It is what gives true purpose and meaning to life. May the Father draw us to see this need for Jesus to calm the storm and to clarify His purpose for our lives. May we see the need for the cross to restore and redeem our life from sin and death, and follow through with entrusting our lives to Jesus. And finally, may we float to the final shore, powered, filled, and guided by the Holy Spirit. Let's pray. Lord God, we come to You today, and Lord, it's so easy to build a life for ourselves, to build our own ark with our works, our sustenance. The only problem is we can only go as long as our lives last. Whether it be 50, 100, maybe even 120 years. It was still even so long. That's all we have. And that's all we can sustain ourselves for. But God, You saw our sinking ship. You saw our status with our sin and what we were reaping with our lives. You saw that we were sunk in death, and you cut yourself off. You sent your Son, Jesus Christ, to be cut off and flung to float our lives back up, to raise us up from the dead. Lord, may we trust in this. And not only just to say, I believe, but to bring us out of that death and to restore us back onto the life that you purposed for us, so that we can work again, doing what you've called us to do, fishing on the right side of the boat, swinging and hitting the wood and cutting it with the axe. Lord, help us to trust in you. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.